Well, welcome to Run, Walk, Talk Tales of Inclusion and Development. I'm Judy, and my pronouns are she and her, and I'm here with Steph, and her pronouns are she and her. And today we're going to discuss empathy in the workplace, which is actually a topic we have wanted to explore for a while now. And so I'm really excited. And as usual, let's dive in. And Steph, maybe for you, empathy is often described as a key leadership trait. For you, what does it look like in practice?
Okay. So when I was prepping, because I knew we were going to be talking about empathy and I wanted to sort of prep, I have to share this quote from
Hmm.
Maria Ross's book, The Empathy Dilemma. So around empathy, and I'm gonna read it out and then I'll share why I
Hmm.
like this. So empathy is being willing and able to see, understand, and where appropriate, feel another person's perspective and to use that information to act compassionately. I think that quote really sort of sums up this feeling around belonging for our employees to be sort of seen
Hmm.
and heard.
Hmm.
Um, the statement around using the information and acting compassionately, again, I really think it sort of shows that we look at our employees not just as you're a person who does work here, but you're a father, a mother, a son, a daughter. You
Whole
are
human
somebody.
being.
Well, that's exactly it. And I
Hmm.
think, and then to use the statement around that, to use that information to
Hmm.
me really describes that active listening piece that
Mm.
you truly, in a conversation, you heard what the person needed or was feeling. So that's when I read that kind of quote, I was like, that just really sums it up for me. What about you?
Well, I really like that quote that you've given. Like I think that that for me also is how I would describe
Yeah.
empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And I often think about Brene Brown in the area of
That's
empathy
right.
and her work in it. And I think that she often talks about understanding and being able to share in the feelings of another person, and that is in what you've just described it.
Yeah.
And I think if I'm thinking about it in the workplace, it's really that ability to connect with people and
Mm-hmm.
really recognize where people are at in the workplace. So
Yeah.
noticing and observing what's going on for them. And I think it's the responsibility of leaders to create an environment where people feel valued and supported, and that really begins with empathy. And if we don't have it in leaders, it can lead to, and you touched on this, that kind of detachment
Mm.
or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's seeming to show indifference to
Mm-hmm.
people. They just
Yeah,
become, as you said, like they're just another worker.
that's
And
right.
so I've been thinking a lot, and we did a while ago. I think one of our first podcasts was leadership books, and one of mine was Simon
Yes.
Sinek. And so I've been thinking a lot in terms of empathy in the workplace. It really is
Yes.
that leader caring for the people in your care, like they're in your care, all of the people at
That's right.
work.
That's right.
And so, yeah, if the way it would show up for me is, noticing people, checking in with them. If somebody isn't themselves,
That's right.
asking what's going on. Is everything
Mm-hmm.
okay? How are you
Mm-hmm.
doing?
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about people, as you said, as they are coming to work with all sorts of pieces to their identity, right? So,
Yeah.
and the other person who always comes to mind with empathy is Daniel Goleman, because I
Oh,
think
yes.
if you don't have it, if it isn't something that comes naturally to you,
Mm-hmm.
empathy is a skill that we can build. We can build
That's right.
capability around it. And as you said, active listening is one of those pieces that
That's
we
right.
can get better at, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that sometimes comes up with empathy is people think that, well, if we're just empathetic and caring, there's not going to be any accountability. So, what would
Mm.
you say to that? Like, how as leaders do we balance empathy and accountability? And can you be an empathetic leader and still, hold people to account, high performance standard, all of those things that we also need in the workplace as well, right?
I know. I know. I really do think that there is this myth of if you're an empathetic leader, it means that, I don't know, you're not getting your work done. You're sitting around talking about feelings all the time and things like that, right?
Hmm.
Which is absolutely not true, right? I think leadership, and we've seen it over the years, and I feel like it's not a topic that, it's not a new concept, but traditional leadership, or what we've seen as traditional leadership, as the leader telling their team what to do in a very directive manner, as of a go and do it and let me know when you're finished. Like, that hasn't worked for many, many years in the knowledge economy, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And especially when we talk about the equity, diversity, and inclusion field, about sort of diverse perspectives. I mean, diverse perspectives make your companies more innovative,
Hmm.
but they also, and if let's say you don't care about innovation,
Hmm.
it also helps against risks, because they can
Hmm.
raise things to sort of prevent sort of big things happening and big mistakes in companies. So
Right.
like, on both sides. And I think when you're empathetic and you know your team, they do better because they have a leader who that they know is, kind of, to say, in their court and has their back
Hmm.
for when potentially things might go sideways or things like that, because we're dealing with so many different personalities in the workplace.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
what do you think?
Well, I agree with what you said. Like, you can absolutely have high performance and empathy. And there's been, research done that actually shows the more empathy you have in your leaders, actually, it increases high performance. It increases
Yeah.
engagement in the
Yeah.
workplace. It does all of those things. It increases the level of like safety within an organization. It
It's
does all of those
important.
things that we do know, as you're saying, impact the financial bottom line positively. And, you know, you were talking about that kind of old-fashioned command and control way
Yeah.
of leading. It just doesn't cut it any longer. And so, yeah, I absolutely think we can hold people to account and still show empathy. And I think a lot about the work of, I love Kim Scott and Radical
Mm-hmm.
Candor,
Mm-hmm.
that notion that, and again, going to Simon Sinek, you have to be caring um, as a leader. And part of being caring and empathetic is also holding people to account, sharing feedback very directly and very candidly, because we want people to grow. So to me, it's almost like, yeah, you absolutely hold them to account in a very caring and kind and compassionate way. So I think ideally, accountability and empathy really can go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, so many of us are now working in remote and hybrid work setups, for some people resulting because of, COVID and working from home. But I think many of us started working remotely or in hybrid situations prior to that. And
That's
so
right.
there can be this question of, how do leaders connect and have empathy for their teams if they're not working with them physically? So what would you say to that?
Yeah. You know what? I find this really interesting, this topic around sort of connection and remote
Hmm.
work. And from
Hmm.
my perspective, I have been working remotely or hybrid since like 2004.
Hmm.
I had a manager in Denver in 2004.
Hmm.
What are we, like 21 years ago,
Yeah.
right? And I
Yes.
was able to get my work done. And I did find it really interesting when I moved to another organization in 2020, and
Hmm.
there was real concern
Hmm.
from managers and leaders about this working from home and people getting their work done and whatnot. So I think it really comes down to a few kind of simple and consistent sort of steps. And there's a couple suggestions I have.
Hmm.
One is you have to have one-on-ones with the people who report to you.
Hmm.
Like, it really is a non-negotiable.
Hmm.
I have regular one-on-ones with my team, and they're not 30 minutes, they're an hour.
Okay.
So with three people reporting into me, I make sure I really try to protect that time, because
Hmm.
it gives the time and space. Like 30 minutes is fine, I feel like, for various
Hmm.
things to kind of go through updates, but An hour gives you the time and space to sort of work through issues. And I get to sort of understand where they're coming from. They get to
Hmm.
understand my perspective. So it builds
Hmm.
that rapport.
Hmm.
And then the other piece is, and I know this gets maybe a bit of a bad reputation. And when I say pizza parties or whatever, it's not so
Hmm.
much it's having a meal together. Like
Oh, yeah.
have lunch together, and whether that's pizza or not pizza
And
or whatever.
virtually, you can do that virtually.
Do you know what? 100%. You're right. In my mind, I was thinking I'm fortunate enough the team for me is
Hmm.
within the same location so that we can come together and be face to face. But you're right, virtually too. And to
Hmm.
really just take that time
Hmm.
to have a meal and connect on something. And
Hmm.
not that people need to share everything because people are, they have different perspectives and some people are more open than others.
Hmm.
But just an opportunity to kind of not be focused on deadlines, KPIs, OKRs, all of the acronyms around our productivity at work, right?
Right,
What
right.
what what what's your take on this?
Well, and I want to go back to something you said though, because I think, and I do, I love that idea of having a full hour, but I'm also mindful of depending on how many people you may have reporting into you,
It's
it
true.
might be difficult to do that.
Yeah.
And you may need to have less time, or maybe you do them, bi-weekly instead of weekly. But I agree with you, like those one-on-one touch points are really
Yeah.
important, particularly if you've got a team where everybody is working in different offices. I
Yes.
think that's what I find so interesting, right? Like when we talk about hybrid work, so often, even if people are working in the office, the person you're reporting into might be in a different location entirely. So there's more to it than just working from home, working in a hybrid environment, or being in the office. There's all of these other things going on with that.
Mhm.
And I do believe like you can absolutely connect with people virtually
Yes.
one-on-one in meetings. Like I said, you can sit down and like have eat together, virtually connecting with one another. I think those things are important. And to your point, like how do you know if people are actually working if you don't see them? Well, because we have KPIs and OKRs and we're measuring the outcomes.
That's
So
right.
we do have a window into our people completing the work. And I always think that if there are people who aren't going to complete the work, it doesn't matter if they're in the office or if they're at home.
That's right.
They're going to be wandering around the office, maybe chit-chatting with people all day. Like I think
Hmm.
most people want to come to work and do the work that is asked of them, and it
Yeah.
doesn't matter if they are at home or if they're in the office. I think the only thing I would think about is um, depending on what their environment is like at home. So if they've got young children, for
That's right.
example, it's going to be very difficult for them to be
Hmm.
working from home. They
Hmm.
may need to be in the office. And again, that goes to checking in with people and finding out, where they're at, what's going on for them, where do they work best. Um, so yeah, I think ultimately we're saying similar things. Like it's about checking in with people, making
That's
sure that
right.
people are doing okay, and we can do that, regardless of whether we're working from home or in the office.
And I'll just say one other thing before we
Yeah,
sort of close
wrap it up.
today. Yeah, I think one of the things with empathy that we also, as leaders, is we also realize leaders have a lot of pressure on them. And so it
Mm-hmm.
might feel like empathy is just another thing that we need to do
Mm,
in the workplace. But I guarantee you, if you take the time to connect with your team, the results are absolutely worth it. So, try to do the active listening, the connecting with your team, outside of work. I guarantee you it will help you in your leadership journey and the way that your team thinks of you and speaks with you and whatnot. So
perfect way to close this out.
that's right.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for taking the time today and joining. Until next time.